start. So welcome to our fireside chats. I'm Jose. I'm working with Path and Digital Square in the pursuit of interoperability, I guess. We are working with standards. We're working a lot with FHIR. We're trying to promote the usage of FHIR very intensely. And these chats, they are a part of our set of actions to stimulate the use of FHIR, the adoption of the digital goods in your projects. So we have every month we have a FHIR webinar where we explore a bit more in detail the technologies and the communities and tooling around FHIR. So those are more webinars for catching up, learning a few things, and having some deeper insights. And they are more structured. They have a schedule and a program. These sessions, they are more ad hoc. They are open sessions. They have no dedicated agenda. So we build the agenda as we want. And yeah, let's start with that. I would start. So we have Sonia and Chris and Sovelo. And I would like to see if there is anything that you would like to talk about. So if you have any specific requests, just put them on the chat or speak up. If not, then we might have a more exploratory discussions. We might want to see where you are in your projects. What are your current issues? So I might help to uncover where you have, and then have some interesting discussions like, oh, did you go across this bridge yet? Or I'll hopefully learn a few things from whatever it is that you're doing or want to do in specifically in FHIR. With that, anything that you would want to bring, any specific topics that you would like us to discuss? Chris, anything from your side?
Yeah, thanks, Jose. I think if there's nothing else that people want to discuss, so I'm not really that technical in terms of FHIR, but you know, I'm the CEO of Gembi, and basically we've got quite a large contingent of developers and technical people who are working intensely with FHIR through the TAP program, as you know, of course, with yourself and with others at Path. And I think we have a lot of shared interests in terms of exactly what you were saying earlier, you know, around the promotion of FHIR. And my interests are mostly around, at this stage, I mean, I've got a technical interest in FHIR. I mean, I like dabbling it, but I'm, you know, a dabbler. I'm not really work with it every day. But I think, you know, so my interests are more like, you know, how do we promote the adoption in Africa among our projects? So using TAP, you know, capacity building, how we see adoption among the implementing partners that we have. I mean, we've got obviously quite a lot of skills and competencies in FHIR, but you know, in order to develop software that's FHIR-based, etc., it's going to need to be adopted more widely. And we've had a lot of interest in how we do that, how we might use the TAP program to do that, how we could, you know, use Path's other interests through Digital Square and just generally. So if there's, you know, I'm sure that you would prefer, or this is designed more to discuss technical aspects of FHIR, and I've certainly enjoyed those in the past. But if that doesn't come up, then perhaps we could talk a little bit more strategically. Okay.
Yeah, I actually do look for. So let me also check. So before I check what other topics or concerns the other colleagues that are joining in they might have, just let me quickly address that. So that's definitely an interesting topic. The fact that we have very good technical enablers, it can mean something, it can mean a lot, or it can mean nothing, depending on where we are and if we have a strategy behind it. So there's a couple of strategic pushes behind the adoption of FHIR, namely agility, which in my view contributes a lot to better medical software, which is at the end, I think, what we want in terms of our intervention. So what we can do is, I mean, what we all want is better care for people, but we as ITers, we cannot, sadly directly take an intervention in that. What we can do is to provide the best tools for the clinicians and population health organizations to take care of that. So better health software, that's what that's I think pretty much our reach. But agility has a very strong, in my opinion, a very strong influence in that. So what we are, there's a couple of directives behind the way that not only FHIR is working, but the way that we are working with FHIR. Things like better managed data, agility. I mentioned the more of a community sense. So we have a lot of these things, and I'm really, really interested in that. That's actually one of the points that I have put upon myself, is that, okay, I have a tool, so what? Having a tool like FHIR doesn't make us able to provide solutions. So this is definitely a topic that I would like to address. But if you allow me, I will just check with the others if they have any or what topics they have, not if they have, what concerns they have and where they are in the journey of adoption. Is that okay?
Perfect. Thanks very much,
Yep.
Jose.
So in order of arrival, Sonia, do you have anything to share with us in terms of any concerns that you are currently having on FHIR? Any specific problems that you say, I cannot do this, or I don't know how the terminologies work, or I don't know how to make an implementation guide, or I do not know how to make an invariant, those things. If you have any of those technical things, or also non-technical things, please just let us know. Or if you just want to share where you stand, where you are in your journey in the FHIR adoption, and what do you think you expect to take out of these discussions? Feel free to tell us or to chat. And if you are not ready for that, I'll just jump on. So Sonia, just come up at any time where you want. Same thing for Claude. Claude, we were just before you joined, we were just introducing the scope of these calls. If you haven't joined any, it's a pretty open and ad hoc call. We don't have an agenda. We just ask people what is the current pain points, what's the current thing that you think we should discuss, and then we have an open discussion on that. Some things I might know better, some things I will definitely learn. For example, I expect to learn a lot about the strategic use of technology tools. So Claude, do you have anything that you would want to bring up to the group as a interesting thing to talk about, or things that matter to you, or things that you have any specific things to discuss?
Hi there.
Hi.
No, not really. I found this email in my inbox. Actually, I don't remember even signing up, to be honest. But I'm kind of new in the world of FHIR, so I'm just trying to learn more about it. That's
okay. Good. Then we have also some things to share with you. And Piraya, I think, if I'm correctly pronouncing your name, do you have any topics, any ideas that you would want to discuss? Anything that you want to throw onto the table? If not, Sovelo, do you have anything? Oh, Sonia is just typing a few things. Okay, I'll just get back to that. Sovelo, do you have anything also to bring to our as topics or things that you see that are important? Anything
Yeah,
that
so
matters?
I was going to mention this. I am not very sure like how many are aware of the development of the Android FHIR SDK, which is the work that is led by Google. And we are fortunate to have Honor like being the first adopters of this. As Google is developing this SDK, Honor are like rewriting their OpenSRP platform to like use FHIR native. And so I think for it being Android native, it is going to make life a bit easier for developers that they can learn FHIR like from the side of Kotlin language, which they are already used to. Because I think for now, what I think like for now the task is someone has to learn FHIR side. and has to learn how they're going to integrate that into their programming language. And the fact that Google is building this inside of Android, inside of Kotlin, it is going to make life a bit easier. So it is something for like people to keep an eye on, because they are like still in the alpha and the beta versions for some of the libraries. But I think this is going to be something like easy to pick up by developers.
Great, great, indeed. I will make a reference to this as we go through a couple of things. So, Chris, you were the first one, but can I start from the beginning and address the point where Sonia comes from, which is she is trying to have standards in place, and this is apparently not yet decided by the authorities. So, Chris, do you mind if I start with that challenge, because that's a challenge that many people have?
Yes, please go ahead. That sounds great.
My experience. So I have been working as a in healthcare IT for quite a while, and one of the things that I realized, and I can tell you one experience. And Sonia, I'm just going to through the drawers of my mind to see what things are most present in my memory that could be triggering some impactful thoughts from your side to help make a point for standardization. So the world of IT is complicated because we make it complicated, but it's also very interesting because there's lots of things that have been done in IT for process improvement, for quality improvement in the last few years, that even with the complexity, whether it's necessary or not, the community is still able to do and reuse very nice tools. So we live in a world that's fully digital, and the digital consumer goods that we have around us, and the digital technologies and the enablers behind this, all of these things, they actually, it's amazing evolution of technology. There is a couple of things that we can get from it. So the first thing is, and one of the most important things is actually standards. So as I was working with Health IT, I think it was my first project many lives ago. I had to integrate, we had to put a system to work in a hospital. And I was thinking, and this is just, the way that I was thinking for sustainability. Okay, I have to do this now, but I also want to do this in a way that in the future, I'm not going to be, standing 24 hours or being next to my phone 24 hours, because if that machine fails, then in that case, the people won't get their medication properly, or it's going to be a lot more effort to get medication to the people. So it was not a critical a life support system, but it was still critical from the hospital perspective. So I was thinking, how can we do this in a way that this work remains sustainable, especially the IT part, so the interfacing part. And that's when I started thinking that, I'm just saying this because there's one part that I think is very common. So that's when I thought that I'm sure there are standard ways of doing, or let's see, how can I do this interface, or how can I make these two systems talk to each other? And then during that research, I think there was no Google at the time. During that, paper-based research, or maybe it was, I don't know, Alta Vista or something like this. It was really a long time ago, or Yahoo. What was evident for me was that there is a standard. There was a thing called HL7 standard. And I tried to learn about this. And then I thought what many people think, which is, you know what, I just need to connect these two systems, and it's just one-to-one. And I just need 5 or 6 data elements. I don't need to learn a complicated standard, because I just need this. I just need this to work now. And it's not that I was lazy. It's not that I was under pressure for doing something quick and dirty. It's because when you're doing these things, especially in healthcare, you have to. So systems should not be stopped because the IT guys didn't make up their mind. So there's always one moment that everyone thinks, you know what, I don't need standards. I just need it to work. And after that, immediately after that, through first of all the fact that at some point I moved on to other things, that I did not maintain that stuff anymore, but I had to maintain the other systems. And it was interesting to see that, maybe I should, or maybe I was rightfully careful, because then it's much more easy for someone else to come in and support the systems. So I was thinking a bit on that. And then a few years later, when I was doing a bigger project, and this is what I wanted to get, I looked at the hospital architecture for Exchange, and I saw, oh my God, I think it was 18 interfaces or so, just between 3-4 systems, because the architecture was complicated. And I said in a moment of, I don't think this feels right. I've read a bit about the standards. I will study more the standards, because if I have to do and maintain these 18 standards, I think that was 18, I will never do anything else than maintaining these standards. Me and the team will have a lot of effort. So I think we came down to 4, I think 6, I don't know. That was a huge reduction just by looking at the standards and see, what does it mean? Oh wait, it does mean the same thing. It's just the payload that is different. So that was a bit of engineering, architecturing work that we had to do. And I wanted to reach the point of saying, if we have standards, so first of all, we live in a world that's based on standards. I'm talking to you through a Bluetooth enabled thing, check standards, looking at the computer, check standards. We are talking about FHIR, JSON, XML, standards. So everything standardized. I'm plugging my thing on the wall. Standards are everywhere, and that's what enables fast development, because we don't have to worry with everything. I remember being involved recently in a project where we said we need to capture the data that someone is capturing, but we just want to do it quick and dirty. And I was in my corner saying, yeah, if you do it quick and dirty, you will take longer than if you do it right, based on standards. And that happened. I mean, at some point, the project became much slower because they did not use the standards. So the fact that we have always have this resistance to, yeah, I just need to do my things, I don't need to learn standards, that's very normal. And I think it should be accepted, or for me, in my opinion, should be accepted as normal, as a normal phase that everyone goes through. If I have to learn a complicated standard, although I'm really devoted to standards, but if I have to learn a new standard that's not really in my scope, I'll say, you know what, I just do my own thing. I know it, but now I know it has a big cost. It might be wrong or right, but it has a big cost. So we are all enabled by standards, baseline standards from the plug we connect to the JSON file structures. All of those are standards, and FHIR is one level higher, which is we are defining a standard API for healthcare. We are defining, if I want to exchange data about a patient, this is the data that I send. Do I send the date of birth, or do I send the current age? Well, I send the date of birth because that has been discussed by a community of experts. And this is also another point. By using standards, we get out of the box lots and lots of thinking power, although we should be a bit critical about not accepting everything that comes from standards just because it is. I respect a lot the work that has been done by my colleagues, because when you make a standard, you have to go through several lengthy discussions of how will this work in terms of privacy. So, for example, an old question of patient gender versus gender identity. People have been discussing this for a long time, and the standards, they consolidate some things, which is you have a patient gender, which is the, I don't know if you can say, so yeah, it's administrative gender, because that has been discussed, like it's so in FHIR it's female, male, unknown, and other. But immediately we say this is not the gender identity of the person, and the gender identity of the person is so vast, so broad, depending on the countries, that you might want to use something else. And then there is the clever trick of saying, if you talk about these things that administratively most countries have, you do it like this. If you have something much more complicated, you're still unable to do that. So FHIR is one standard, one of the many standards. Like I think all the standards, they include lots of built-in knowledge. And this is why as you get acquainted to standards, and now I'm talking both to Sonia and to Chris, as you get more and more into the standards, you start making solutions really like that. You look at something and say, I've seen this somewhere. Oh yeah, okay, there's a standard that we can use here. There is something. And this brings a lot of strength to the arguments. This brings a lot of trust to the stakeholders. So if I go and talk to a government And if I talk about standards for the sake of standards, maybe the government wants that, but that's not the thing that I think I should defend. But if I talk to a government, the Ministry of Health, and if we say we have a big digital program, or we want to have a big digital program and we don't know where to start, I would not say let's look at standards, but I would say let's look at the thing that consolidates a lot of the international experience and by different kinds of experts in many types of cultures. And let's start with that. Let's start by learning all that and be critical about this, but let's not start from scratch. And the way to do this, and all of that is wrapped in a technical standard. Another few things that FHIR does bring to us. Hi, Richard. We are just talking, as usual, freewheeling about topics. The topic now
Fantastic.
is that we just have the, so Chris is having a lot of people focusing on FHIR and digital IT projects, and we at Gembi, and we have the, and we always have the challenge of, yeah, okay, so we are just the guys, the boys with the toys, me. So I have a toy, I have FHIR, I can do things with it. We have technologies, but what really matters, that's not what really matters. What really matters is the impact that this can have in the people that are receiving care, or that are supposed to receiving care, or better yet, people that don't need to receive care, because if we've done our job and we minimize a bit of suffering, or we help minimize a bit of suffering, then we are in a good karma. So yeah, and we're talking about this, like, what do standards bring? Because Sonia is looking at what is this about standards, and I guess that in your country, Sonia, there's also a bit of hype and a bit of wow about FHIR. FHIR is taking over, etc., which is true, and it's very, very well justified. So it comes with a lot of things. It comes with a lot of legacy and experience that people have been for many, many years, dozens of years, looking at standards and looking at how do we implement IT projects, and how do we make it in a way that it's reusable across other projects, so that we don't have to start from scratch. How do we do it in a way that the project can grow? Like the example I gave, if I make my 6 interfaces, I think it was 6. If I make my 6 interfaces, the point was not only that from 18 I came to 6. The point is that if I chose the other path, today I have 18, tomorrow I'll have 10, 25. But if I have 6, and we said these are the 6 that should support everything, so we had kind of a baseline or a framework that was much more powerful than just doing point-to-point communications. So and by adopting standards, we are adopting these good practices in terms of architecture, in terms of data structures, in terms of enabling IT to take better care of their data. Other things that are important is, and this is one very dear topic for me, is how do we make the FHIR discussions more business user friendly? Because once you go down the rabbit hole, or down the black hole of this is a technical thing, it's a development thing. Once you show a JSON file, that there's a mental switch in my head that says, okay, we are, now it's us, that now we are excluding the people that cannot read JSON, and those people are the ones that actually can bring us the most value in their clinical insight. So I think from the standards perspective, it's Sonia, just if I have to give some ideas, not only about the FHIR as a hype and as a really good technology, so it condenses a lot of good and recent technologies. So it uses the from being a RESTful API, or for supporting a RESTful API, it goes to GraphQL, which is an amazing thing to get data, to get lots of data at the same time in scattered sources. It's really nice. But the most important thing is that there's a very lively community, very helpful community that you can reach out at any point to say, hey, I have a problem. I do not know how to register a vaccination adverse event. If you just put this on the FHIR chat, there will be lots of people that are willing to help you, or say, oh, we have done something like this. Why don't you look at our specifications? And there's lots of materials published out there. FHIR is also an open standard, so it also helps you on board. So with this, I just put the link of the FHIR chat. My usual thing that I say in the beginning and at the end of every conversation: if you don't have an account on chat.phir.org, please go get one. And there's lots of groups there. I'll just open it myself on my side. It's just a community engagement thing, so it's nothing but a chat, and it's nothing less than a chat. So if I just share my screen, I presume you can see my screen. Would someone confirm, please?
Yep, we can see it.
Now we can.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, so there's lots of discussions about all sorts of things, so more technical stuff, but for example, terminologies or encounter classes, so that's more administrative stuff, or more about applications or how to use compound medications. And if you're not happy with the topics, you can look for other topics. You can look for more clinical topics. You can look for more innovative topics. You can look for more regional topics. And there's always space for discussions there. So I think the biggest thing about FHIR is that as a community, it gave space to a lot of growth. There are some strategic things even behind that. So striving for openness, striving for everything gets published immediately after you make a decision. So all of that is something that we can walk through. And just one final point for the FHIR for the standards adoption, just mostly for Sonia. Oh, Sonia's not there. Oh yeah, she is. In the webinars that we have, I don't know if anyone can please put it in the chat, or if they're already in the chat. Our webinars that we have, at least in the first one, I remember I started by talking. We have lots of standards for lots of things. We have more technical standards, more business process standards. So, for example, how does a prescription work in a country? That's a business process standard, and that's not a technical standard. That's not something that FHIR does. FHIR doesn't say how a prescription goes or doesn't go to a pharmacist for validation. FHIR says if a prescription needs to go somewhere, this is how it should look like, and this is how anyone can get to it, by doing a search or by doing a direct pull. So this is what standard does, but I try to put this in a map like we are here. We are in a point of not really technical. It's a functional specification. It's a data architecture, or sorry, the data specification that we have. A bit into some part of the business processes, because we have to define sub-process like search and response, etc. But FHIR is in that area there. So by looking at that and see what do I have to standardize, which in many projects you should try to standardize what's possible and not more, then yeah, FHIR has a specific place to fit there. So I would shut up with this now and ask for more input into this discussion about FHIR strategies and FHIR and what is missing that when we go to FHIR, because also it's also my interesting a topic of interest for me. I don't want just to be the boy with the toy. I want to have, what is it, the man with the plan. And that's something that I'm pushing myself towards, and all the discussions in that are useful. Sorry, and just one thing, because Richard joined, just as a scope, we started with broad introduction on FHIR because that's the topic that people brought. I hope that Chris can now push this more into where he feels that we should be going. Sonia is starting with FHIR, but Richard, of course, if you have any specific things that you would like to have discussed, just bring up. It's a round table, although I do a lot of the talking, I prefer not to.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to hear what, I don't want to ask too many questions. I'm happy to hear what others are interested in discussing.
Okay. Just jump in. So Chris, if you have any things like, okay, from this is what I can think at this moment of in terms of how does this fit? That's how, I am not a standards expert, if I'm a health IT expert, and this is my personal mantra the last few months. If someone from the Ministry of Health wants to talk to me, what would I tell them? I would not tell them you have to use FHIR. I would tell them something else, but I'm still trying to discover what is it that I would say. Is it about training people? And what people do we want to train? I mean, if a country says we need to start from scratch or we need to do something, is it about training people? Is it about training technical people? Or getting the technical people and the clinical people in a room? And how does that meeting go? Do you facilitate that? Do you have a plan up front? Like, these are the things that we should go for, or do we have maybe a pilot and then let people work out their methods from there? Do you want to go with a prescriptive method of saying, we have to have, in the first 3 months we do business analysis, and the next 3 months we do prototyping, and then we do implementation, and then we do testing? So you can perfectly do that. Or you say, we have a topic, but we don't have a scope yet. So now it's up to a couple of iterations to figure out the perfect scope. Or do you put the terminologists in the loop as well, and then people are discussing more data and less solution, in the sense that data is really, well, I usually say data is not the new oil. Data is the new plastic, because it's really everywhere. But I think at some point, data is really, really important to talk about. So at some point, people that are handling terminologies, they are also very important partners. And I still haven't discovered that. And actually, I do look forward for any ideas that you would have on this, and any pain points that you are feeling. Chris, anything from your side? Any thoughts that can help us steer the discussion?
Thanks, Jose. I mean, I think the position we're in at the moment in many of the countries we're in is that they are still at the position of really trying to adopt standards generally. Talking mostly about interoperability standards, but also content standards. And I think as you opened up with, saying that, Path and Digital Square are vigorously promoting the adoption of FHIR as a standard. And I think, we of a similar mindset. And although we don't want to be prescriptive, as you were saying, in any way, or push people in any direction, we're also trying to, get the adoption or promote the adoption of standards generally, using FHIR as the most likely example to use. So, I mean, it just, it doesn't make sense, I think, to go back and try and advocate for adopting HL7 V2 or V3 type standards at this stage. It seems, that FHIR would be the way to go. So it's trying to think through how we would do that in an African setting, and the kind of steps that we would need to go through for that. We find that there's, I think, growing interest in that, in the adoption of standards generally, and FHIR in particular. I think a lot of people have heard of it and are interested in moving in that direction, and trying to think through what are the kind of baby steps that we need to do to sort of cater for this growing demand in Africa, and think that through.
I can actually give you, so as you were saying this, I was thinking that was ringing some bell in my head. I can share some things, but so first thing, it's a challenge now. So, or it's a crazy idea before being a challenge. Let me just put out the crazy idea there. Do you think it makes sense to start working towards collaboratively, us, you, me, whoever wants to join, that we start collecting some thoughts about, what are the typical steps, typical pitfalls, and typical things that people might want to take care of? Do you think that would be helping us?
Yes, I definitely think so. And I just want to say at the outset that we have had one or two sort of starts on this. So that chat.fhir.org service that you showed earlier, there is actually a FHIR Africa channel on that. That we started with Graham Grieve and Carl Leitner.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go. So that was an attempt to get something going. And we had a couple of meetings, we got people together and we bounced a few ideas. We presented something at the OpenHIE community meeting, but it's kind of hasn't gotten going. And as you said, I mean, we know that Path and Digital Square are keen to push this forward. There are a couple of isolated pockets of people. I mean, Richard and co have developed a client registry based on FHIR, and you know, so there are pockets of activities that have happened, and it seems that, you know, whether we use the FHIR Africa channel or something else, you know, if we pool our resources, and of course we're trying to do this through the CDC TAP program, you know, whether it makes sense for us to try and pool resources together, and as you said, kind of almost plot out a landscape or a roadmap of how we would sort of systematically start providing. And I'm not going to say that I know what those steps should be, but I can imagine things like, you know, how we would provide support for countries seeking to adopt FHIR, you know, how we would, you know, do we need, you know, I mean, and we know that there are a lot of resources out there like digital squares that, you know, you showed them earlier. There's a lot of FHIR 101 webinars, but maybe what people need is more of a kind of step-by-step guide to, you know, how do you start at the beginning and move through. And we have support from HL7 for this as well. I think they're even willing to commit resources to helping this. So I think, you know, sorry, to cut a long story short, I think if we mobilize ourselves and get organized and believe that it's worthwhile to try and promote this as a way to get standardization in Africa based around FHIR as the most likely example, I think, you know, there could be a need, and that could be a great service to do. Thanks.
Indeed. Well, that's awesome. So just gave me a lot of things to think about, and allow me to jump in, and the others, please interrupt me and just jump in with other ideas or more problems. That's all fine. So if we look into, you know, let's, you know, capture some ideas or some things. I did not mention the second part, which is, let's see if something like that exists first. That's the rule number one of standardization or whatever. Let's see if we are doing something that already exists. If so, let's reuse that. I just took a couple of notes. One thing is shiny things. So, and the other is standardization process. I wanted to mention this when you mentioned the FHIR Africa. The people will react to shiny things, and what is shiny depends on the people. You know, technologists will react to shiny new technologies. You know, things that, like, for example, the things that we were playing with a few months ago, you click a button and you have a server. Wow, that's interesting. For a nerd like me, for someone that's on the clinical side, so what? However, if you go to a clinical person and say, oh, this is your data model, he doesn't care. But if you say, oh, this is a form that shows a preview of your data model, say, oh, okay, now I can play with it. So people will tend to value these things. And what I think might help there to mobilize people is a couple of things. So first of all, a couple of shiny enough things. Sorry for the, you know, if the expression seems not the most politically correct one. A couple of, or seems a bit diminishing. But it's just about, if you look at it from a distance, you have a nice thing there. You have a nice thing there. You have a couple of nice things that sparkle in something that, if there's something that doesn't exist, if you have green grass and then you have a couple of shiny things spread throughout the place. Okay, well, something is here, and if they become more and more, then it draws attention. And when you draw attention, you draw capacity. You also draw the community towards it. So shiny things, I think it's a good catalyst for making shiny things. I mean, making cool initiatives and advocating them and evangelizing about them, which is the work that you are doing. That has the power of drawing some attention and keeping a baseline of interest. And it's something that needs to be done. Next to that, I think you have to do two things. First of all, make sure that community has a place to meet and a place to go to. I think this is very important, so that if you have enough people on your country, hey, who's doing FHIR? And I did the same thing for the Portuguese-speaking community. It failed miserably. I mean, in my expectations, they were high, so I thought that, oh, then we can have everyone that speaks Portuguese will be looking at FHIR, and maybe the people that are not doing FHIR yet, but they are doing IT, then, you know, with the contact here and there, then people can join this. It didn't work as I expected, but still it's there, and we can use that. And so you have to give a place for the community to grow. And in the case of a Portuguese language, there were just not enough nice shiny things to work on. But the community, the space for a community an open space for community, and in my preference, always a round table, without any mandate or without any prevailing opinions, whether from the ministry or from any big company. So just a round table without any predominance, then that really helps people to feel at ease and to experiment and to play. What they play with, what they experiment with, depends on the project. If everyone has a really nice project, if there's a big project for something, then people will normally orbit around that because there will be funding available, there will be interest available, there will be people motivated to show up in the news, people motivated to actually do things. So there was lots of motivators in large projects. Or you just say, well, there's a new thing, we want to have a standard API, or people are just data nerds like myself and they want, I would like to have a data of, for example, my own vaccination card, which is still on my to-do list to put on a FHIR format, the COVID vaccination card. I just want to do it. Why? Because I like to play with it. So if you have a couple of things there, yep, you have you can draw attention. And the other thing is, as you grow, you could have some standardization process. You can have some guidelines on like, how do we adopt FHIR in a country? Well, that will come with, I think that will come with things like, what are the main policies in this country if they exist around privacy? What is the legacy in terms of data structures? Some of the data structures are embedded in law, like prescription data. So how do you prescribe a medication? That's typically embedded in law. Do you prescribe generic medication or not? How is the reimbursement process? All those things. So there's lots of things that will impact what you can standardize. So I think at some point you also need a space to define, how do we take all of that? How do we make our functional requirements, our business requirements, our technical requirements, and how do we produce standards in a country? So how do we produce, for example, I'm very interested in helping Mozambique as a country that show up in my radar recently. I'm very happy to, or very motivated to help that country, not to make one or another project, but to have a sustainable scene of standardization in the country. That will be really a good objective. And for that, you do have some process, and there's lots of things that I think we can exchange some stories, like keeping the table round. That's one thing that are really important, that you don't have any predominance of ministries or companies or outside parties, that everyone feels at ease. Keeping the continuous delivery that FHIR really strives for, making lots of projects, making events for the community, but not making it a burden on the community, like that people have to travel across the continent to go to a meeting. So making it a bit fancy, but not too fancy. So I think those are things that just came to mind when you were talking about. There's another thing that you were talking that reminded me. I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is not technical stuff. Sorry for this. This guy he's a philosopher, psychologist, I don't know, sociologist. I don't know if it's useful, but I just put it there in the link, just for general knowledge, because I think in my experience, this changes a lot in how we are doing, how we are working. Dimensions of culture. So it's how countries and cultures tend to react a bit differently to things. So there's countries there where there's more individualism than in others. One that is strikingly impactful, in my opinion, is the power distance. I've lived in Brazil, I've lived in Portugal, and I lived in the Netherlands and Belgium. And there's a big difference in the power distance. And so the things that you can do and how you can address your boss, or how you can say, this plan doesn't make sense, or this plan makes sense. How do you express that? How can you say no, or you cannot say no in a given culture? So all these dimensions, they call the masculinity, as in, is it okay to make mistakes, or you should protect people from making mistakes? Like, so the whatever he calls these dimensions, and so uncertainty avoidance. So these things, they really do matter in the way that your projects are structured. Some countries will say you need to have approval from everyone about every single detail before you can make one step. If you want to be agile, you have to say, this doesn't work for us. We need to be able to experiment, but how can you experiment in a context that's not ready for that? So sorry for the social reference, but I just wanted to mention that there is also a social side to this, or societal side to this. So I don't think there's going to be one standard flavor for doing standardization, although countries in neighboring countries, they will tend to be similar, but there will be differences that also should be aware. So I'm also looking forward to see if I go to a Latin American country, I will have some kind of openness in some things that I will be more reserved in a European country. On the other hand, if I have to say no, this is rubbish, in a Latin country culture to which I belong, I will be much more careful in saying this like that without filters than in a more more North Europe culture. So this may be relevant to you or not, but it in my opinion it really does impact the way that we are working. So about the standardization process, I think this is something that has to be something that we set up. So standardization process is just one way. So Chris, going back to how can we do this? I think one of the things that we have to define is, what do we mean with successful FHIR adoption? And then I think, so if you want to see what are the KPIs that monitor this, you can go for very ambitious things like the number of hospitals that are fully integrated in FHIR. That's not going to happen that soon. Or you can say the number of people that we have in our events and the number of profiles that we get published. And then you will see that also that has some quality, some flaws in terms of monitoring the quality of work. But if we start saying how do we think, how will we measure our success? That's always a good way to start any discussions on where we are going. It's like, how will I know that we are there yet? Yeah, starting to make some or defining some figures like, how am I going to measure my success? Well, if I have, in every university there is a training program that includes standardization, I would be very happy. If people that are studying even clinical sciences, they are aware that they don't have to bother, they don't have to explain everything to the IT guys, because the IT guys, they will have standard references, frameworks around them to deal with, patient encounters and privacy and all those things, then I think that this also helps. Any more thoughts on this?
Jose, can I just ask, in terms of the FHIR Africa channel and event, do you think that's something that's useful to continue going forward, or do you think it's something that we could kind of merge with work that you guys are doing in Digital Square?
This one.
Yeah, that FHIR FHIR Africa channel, because we have been having a monthly meeting, but it's kind of it's not that well attended, to be honest. So the question really is, should we try and pool our resources together? Maybe have one event. I know that your fireside chat is not focused on Africa necessarily, but that's why I'm asking the question. Would it be worthwhile to have a kind of event that's focused on Africa? I'm thinking of all of the technical developers and analysts that we have at Gembi that are focused on building FHIR-based systems as part of the TAP program and part of Digital Square projects we're working on, etc., in African setting. And I'm sort of worried about the long-term sustainability of these in the countries, and keen to see, some sort of infrastructure being built, and perhaps some kind of dedicated support for typical African scenarios and things like that. So that's why we thought FHIR Africa would be useful, but we would need to try and promote it a bit more, get wider adoption, get more people interested in it. Is Zulip the right kind of forum to do this? It's kind of, my personal view is that, this is really, part of a wider mission to strengthen standardization generally. We're using FHIR because it seems the most likely to get traction at this stage. Why use anything else is sort of my question. And yeah, so it's a long journey that we're embarking on, and how to sort of start it off and start developing the infrastructure and the things that would help move it along in a sustainable way.
Right.
Maybe some of the others have got thoughts,
Yeah.
Richard,
So yeah, indeed.
Richard, Sonia, Richard.
So is the question, should that?
How do we maintain, ideas for maintaining the sustainability of a community if we want to start one, or as we are starting one, and yeah,
is it a worthwhile endeavor? You know, Richard, I mean, from your experience, I mean, you guys have, you know, been developing tools and technologies for the same kind of setting that we're targeting, you know. So, I mean, what do you feel about, you know, the long-term sustainability of your work and, you know, the infrastructure in Africa generally to consume, improve, and, you know, continue to build on OpenCR and, you know, FHIR and all these other systems?
Well, I hope you can hear me. So OpenCR is a unique one, right? OpenCR was a prototype of record linkage for patients, but as long as it inspires others to adopt, you know, privacy-oriented record linkage and those kind of technologies, then it's a success, in my opinion, even if they don't use OpenCR itself. In fact, FHIR has a patient matching algorithm and setup that you can use, and it can actually match more than just patients. It can do any kind of matching. You know, I think the technology and the methodology, I think the methodology is the key there, and that it's focused on patient privacy and everything. And I think that is what's long-term, is can we build capacity for folks, and whether they use a specific implementation or not. I mean, obviously I would hope that they would help improve, you know, our products, but also it's a methodology, you know, and I'm not saying like FHIR is a state of mind, but you know, but I'm saying that there is a certain set of methodologies. And I think that in order for something as broad as, say, I don't know, FHIR in Africa, really needs to just be narrowed down. The most active channels on the FHIR chat, other than the general channel, are really narrow. Like it's very, very detailed things about how you do something with a certain function in Happy, or it's one specific error using the HL7 publisher, or it's something extremely narrow, right? It's right around just very, very narrow questions around, usually around tooling. There are questions about specification, but specification comes out of those discussions. So you have a discussion about something publisher, and someone says, well, that doesn't support this, and this is how this is supported. Then someone says, hey, I'll put in a proposal, you know, on the FHIR Jira to support that feature that you've raised. And everyone always says, what's your use case? Right, and that's kind of the key. So I think focusing on use cases is key. I think long-term sustainability is definitely around methodologies and awareness of FHIR and how to use it, and it will be approached differently. But if you're looking for a quick win and low-hanging fruit that we can use to move forward for many countries, frankly, I think a lot of it starts with terminologies. We have decades of in countries managing kind of data dictionaries and concepts and terminologies, and you know, LOINC and SNOMED and the ICD-10 versions are mature, and it's the one thing that crosses all implementation guides. It's the one thing that applies to every aspect of FHIR. It's the one thing that is often imported and used in countries whether they realize it or not. You know, OpenMRS has a specific data dictionary. DHIS2 has its data elements, and category option combos and all that kind of stuff, and so we're sitting in a world in which we are already using that, and that is used all over FHIR. So I think the lowest hanging fruit right now is to rationalize data dictionaries and terminologies and make it easier for folks to use those. That's the best low-hanging fruit right now, in my opinion. That's just an opinion. Some people would probably say, why don't we standardize using questionnaires and mobile phones and get that working? And I agree with that too. And it's turning out to be a profitable area. I don't know how much it's used downstream, like in the real world, folks using, but that's another area people are exploring, right? Just questionnaires, that's all. Just let's write a survey, that's it. A survey with which the data goes into FHIR. Like that one question right there is very narrow, and it turns out to be a huge amount of work. What we're interested in is of course, managing different lists of facilities or patients or whatever. And that work has been taken up by Happy. I mean, the folks at Smile CDR grabbed that and ran with it. So yeah, I look for those narrow use, these aren't narrow, but look for these relatively narrow use cases.
I would underline that and saying, so Richard, sorry if I seem I'm downplaying that, what you said, but these are for me the shiny things. You know, there are things that you can do and say, wow, if you can create the wow effect, like, okay, do we mean we can have now a central data dictionary for our actions? That's cool, because, and then you go into the discussion of that. Or do you mean we can take data from a nurse and put it in a central repository and there create a case-based reporting based on that? Wow, that's, so I think you can create those things. And so I think, Chris, it's really important to have this kind of, for me, it's really important to have some catalysts or some motivators that say, hey, let's just do this. Sometimes they are used as exercises, and it just use them to get people together. I just used one thing a couple of months ago. This is a FHIR of all the FHIR capability statements that I had in my system, which is just one because that's my server at home. But you know, there's so many things that we can do to enable the wow effect. Like imagine that every hospital that has a FHIR server has a different color, like if it's radiology or pharmacy or whatever, that we can start putting this map. Imagine that you can have this throughout the country and say, oh, this is where we are in FHIR. If I see this, I also want to have my hospital in the map as well. I will talk to my IT guys and say, hey guys, can we put this on the map as well? So this kind of enablers and this kind of sorry for the word, but shiny things, this kind of wow effect creating things, if we have them, and I don't know if this is a good one, but so more technology oriented, more terminology oriented, or more just flashy oriented, I think this will also work well in creating and putting some dynamic in the community, because if the community has, yeah, we are here to do a FHIR, but what are we going to do with it? No, we are here to do, you know, a cool project here. It's just a 2-week, then we swarm around that project, and then we do that. I think that's more powerful to give people a motivator, like small goal or a big goal, but something that's pointy, like Richard was saying. It's like these things, pick one. If you pick one of those, I think we have some better chances of creating some synergy within the community. Oh, I see that we are ahead of time, or we had. Yep.
Well, thanks for those inputs. I think that's really valuable. Thanks very much, Richard and Jose. Yeah, maybe we can raise this next time again. And
or if I may challenge you, we can follow up on this on the FHIR Africa channel. And from there, I suggest that we can decide, yeah, let's make an event, or let's make a couple of events, or let's make a couple of chats oriented to FHIR. I'm really happy to join those. But yeah, I think we can plan some actions to make this more dynamic if you want, and we can use the FHIR chat as a thing for this. It's not a meeting between the 4 or 5 people. It's just how can we, you know, let everyone enter the room, and I would favor that. If you want to discuss that, we can take the FHIR chat to discuss what is the next event. Is it one project? Is it a big session? Is it the big